Welcome to the Exponential Edge podcast with your host, Arya Salur. I'm excited to have you join me on this journey, exploring the forefront of technological advancements and innovation that will shape our future. As a junior at Acton-Boxborough Regional High School in Massachusetts and the CEO of SecArmor, a cybersecurity startup, I'm fascinated by the transformative power of technology. In this podcast, we'll dive deep into 5 key areas that are poised for exponential growth in the next decade. We'll be exploring the realms of cybersecurity, generative AI, sustainability and climate tech, biotech and human longevity, as well as the reshoring of manufacturing. And we'll also go over rising startups disrupting the marketplace. These topics and businesses hold immense potential to revolutionize our world and redefine the way we live, work, and interact. Each episode will feature insightful conversations with experts, thought leaders, and visionaries who are at the forefront of these fields. In just 30 minutes, our goal is to provide you with 5 signature nuggets of wisdom from our guests. These key takeaways will empower you with knowledge and help you stay ahead in an ever-evolving technological landscape. Without further ado, let's introduce our guest for this week. Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Maria Daane, the Executive Director of Parents Helping Parents. Hi, Maria.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. So first off, could you just give us a brief summary of your career up to this point?
Sure. I got my education at the Cornell School of Hospitality Administration, and I very quickly started working in the nonprofit sector, usually in front-facing roles like marketing communications. And I got an MBA along the way because I wanted to have the best skills to do nonprofit work. And I've been executive director for PHP in San Jose, California for 8 years now.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And talking about Parents Helping Parents, which is where you're at now, where you're doing great work to help neurodivergent kids, can you share how any anecdote that inspired you to start working in this field and any personal story that shapes your vision for helping these neurodivergent kids?
Okay. So I think for most of us and for your listeners, there's probably a young person with a disability in their life that they love, whether it's their child or their niece or their nephew or their best friend's kid. So I find that disability is a very common experience in the world. For me, what kind of led me to PHP was I had 2 kids in elementary school. And for both of them, they had close friends whose families had children experiencing disabilities. And they had new diagnoses, and we were a small rural school, and the families went to the school administration and said, oh, our kids have this, new diagnosis, and, what should we do? And they came with a feeling of trust and hope. And also, they were going through a lot, having just received some pretty significant diagnoses. And Unfortunately, the administrator at our district and our school was not, didn't do the right things. Like they didn't return the emails, they didn't book the meetings. There's a legal process that you need to go through when families request services that our school just didn't do. And so I watched the families get increasingly distrustful and increasingly angry and increasingly frustrated. And I saw how they used Parents Helping Parents to support them in their advocacy work for their kids. And in the end, the parents were able to get the services that their kids needed and were entitled to underneath the law. But the parents' learning curve was really very steep. If they have a child with a diagnosis, the child needs services, and the parent has to figure things out really quick. And so I came to really see the value of the parent community for parents raising kids with disabilities. And so a few years later, the position opened up at Parents Helping Parents, and I started at PHP. And how that really forms us going forward is it's that experience over and over again that parents have, that they have a child with diagnosis, or the child enters kindergarten and has different needs, or the child starts adolescence and has just different needs, or the child is becoming an adult, and what does that look like? And over again, that same situation replays itself, that the parent needs the support of a community as well as information to help support their child to build a bright future.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And like you said at the start, all of us, or most of us at least, have people in our lives with kids who are neurodivergent or know people who are neurodivergent. And one of those people is a close family friend of mine and my parents and their children. Actually, one of them is was diagnosed with nonverbal autism. And I remember him telling me that when he found out his son was diagnosed at the age of 2, because there weren't any symptoms before that, they were just in shock for about a week or two. They just couldn't comprehend um, the scale as to what their life would be after that. And like you said, these parents need a guiding help because there is a lot of information about
Mm-hmm.
um, possible support systems and things to do to help. But for them, especially, since there was so much information, they didn't know what to actually use. So I feel like Parents Helping Parents would also be a great guiding hand for that.
You're absolutely right. There's an overwhelming amount of information.
Mhm.
So to have the information curated to some extent, so it's
Definitely.
delivering just what you need to know right now, can be very helpful.
hmm And Parents Helping Parents has a great 40-year history. So since its inception, how has the mission and vision changed with the needs of the community?
You know, that's a really great question. We actually will be turning 50 in a few years. So I've been thinking a lot about this. And I think the best answer is our mission and vision really has remained very stable for nearly 50 years, which is that we provide the support and information that parents need to raise their child with special needs so that they can have the brightest future possible. And the parents in the 1970s, that's what they wanted, and the 90s and the 2000s. And so that heart of PHP, that parent-to-parent connection, that peer-to-peer connection, has remained largely unchanged. Our tools have changed. We use, they used binders, and we use, Salesforce and lots of tech tools. But the heart of the connection and the heart of the support is very similar.
And I actually wanted to ask a little follow up, which just speaking with my parents and other people from that generation growing up in the 70s and 80s, um, autism, other cognitive disabilities just were not, uh, there was not widespread knowledge of them to the extent that there is today. And most of the kids who they went to school with who probably had these disabilities were just seen as a little slow or not good at school. And that was just normal for all the kids back then to just think that some kids were just not good at school. So I wanted to ask you how Parents Helping Parents gained traction in such a, I feel like, close-minded era when it came to this topic.
Wow, that's a very astute question. And it has profoundly, the awareness of disability has changed profoundly. Like your generation and my kids are very conversant in neurodiversity and the words and understanding. But back in the 70s and 80s, there really wasn't that. However, what there was parents were incredibly passionate about their kids and their kids doing well. And so there's no drive quite as strong as a parent who feels they have to fight for their child to do well. So a lot of things were diagnosed in the 70s and 80s, just probably some of the more invisible disabilities were diagnosed at a lower rate. But throughout that time, all the parents have been fighters for their kids. And so I wasn't there in the 70s and 80s, but I suspect the traction was gained for the same reason we're gaining it now, which is the drive of the moms and the dads and the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles to see kids do well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's great. And talking about the challenges that these specific families face, I think the biggest one is that depending on the spectrum of disability, these families, their lives now revolve around their child with disability. But could you delve into some specific challenges that you've seen with families with special needs children?
It really varies tremendously by the family based on what their child's disability is and what their circumstance is. I would say a common one is just knowing what resources are available, and PHP supports that by having a resource directory with lots of resources. Another item is inclusion, community inclusion, whether that's inclusion in park and rec programs or inclusion in school programs or inclusion in employment as they become adults, is unfortunately something most of our families have to contend with. And we help support that by raising awareness through advocacy about the unique needs and gifts of our population, and the fact that if we're going to have a rich and full world, everyone needs to be able to participate in it. And then some of our families experience structural challenges in accessing services because of their insurance, or because of the level of instruction in their district, or because of the language they speak. So there are some of our families that have, really unique challenges because of structural inequalities in how we deliver services.
Mm-hmm. And could you share a success story or one or two success stories that PHP has gone through that you find particularly important or would benefit our viewers in any way?
So this is a story I'm particularly proud of, and it is that in the way they fund parent supports for children in the United States, a lot of money goes to funding parents of children up until the age of 22. But after 22, the funding for the parent support goes away. But if you have a child with a really significant disability, that disability does not go away when they're 22. And understanding how to advocate for services through adult systems, the need does not diminish, right? And so nationwide, this is a problem. And we're located in California. It's a problem in California. And our last strategic planning process, it really came through in the survey responses from families that they didn't understand the landscape of adult services or the transition process to prepare their young adult for adulthood. And so we passed as our initiative in the strategic plan that we wanted every family in California to be able to access the information they needed on transitioning to adulthood and adult services 24/7 in English and Spanish. And when we put this plan in place, we had no funding for it. And we could have scraped up maybe $10,000 for it, but almost no funding. And we had no staff dedicated to this. We're now 3 years later. We have a team working on it. We do 100 webinars a year in English and Spanish. Probably about half are California specific, but the other half are relevant to anybody in the United States, and many of them to parents throughout the world. We now are serving about 20,000 people a year via our website on our Connections California program at PHP. And I'm just so incredibly proud of the team that put this together, the staff, the volunteers, the board members, the donors, the funders, that, everyone recognized this need and everyone did what they could to make this happen. But we're not done because, there's hundreds of thousands of families who need this information. So we're at the beginning of the curve, right? And so I'm excited to see how this program will expand and grow and reach even more families in the coming decade.
Yep, that's awesome. And you talked about how you guys focus on that transition from childhood to adult life that's very difficult for these families. And I wanted to ask specifically, could you delve into the details on how PHP helps families and neurodivergent kids transition through the different stages of life?
Okay, so primarily our services are to the parents to make sure that they understand the big picture of the systems of care, their children's rights, how to access supports. And so the basic, mechanisms of that, whether it's support groups or webinars or website information, remains unchanged whether your kid's a toddler or your kid's middle-aged, right? But the information we provide does evolve over time. And then in terms of the supports for the neurodivergent young adults who are approaching adulthood, we recently, in the last couple of years, have added student-led IEPs to the list of things that we train on. And that is about training young adults to start advocating for themselves as part of the IEP process. Because when they become adults, they'll be advocating for themselves in employment situations and perhaps at college and other situations. And so it's good to start young and develop those skills instead of having your parent be your advocate until you're 18 or 20 or 22, and then your parents, not as involved in your life situations, and you need to be advocating for yourselves. So student-led IEPs have been an additional part of what we train on that we did not used to do.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And now, talking about the future of PHP, what specific things are you guys planning to do in the future to expand either globally or in the country?
Well, interestingly, we're actually going backwards a little bit. We were going through our strategic planning process again, and this time the number one request from parents in our as we have, wrapping up the effects of the pandemic, is our community does not have as much relatedness as we used to. Parents used to, pre-pandemic, see each other in person for trainings at agencies like ours. And then during the pandemic, everything went to Zoom, and most of our clients still prefer to access information via Zoom. And so they're not able to develop the friendships or the camaraderie that came from when people were more in person before. And so one of our initiatives going forward will be exploring ways that, post-pandemic, we can rebuild the kind of community connectedness for the next generation of families who will be largely receiving their parent education via Zoom. So how do we best facilitate them developing relationships with each other, which is generally does not happen in the chat function of Zoom.
Definitely. And this program definitely is about the trust aspect of it.
Yeah. And we're also really kind of re-looking at the basic way that our families connect with PHP. We've implemented Salesforce. Our website is more robust, but we're still doing a lot of work over the phones. And so we're looking at ways we can use technology to kind of modernize how parents engage with us. So we're still in the development phase of that, but that'll be an additional focus.
Mm-hmm. And talking about technology, this podcast, that's probably the main topic. And this is a little bit of a different episode, but I wanted to still delve into that aspect of it. How are you guys using technology and possibly AI to advance your services?
That's a great question. So really, it has profoundly changed what we do. Our website is a very robust service vehicle that, I would say a decade ago, it was more like a flyer about what we do. Now there's just a depth of resources there that parents can use to get information without talking to our staff. We do over 600 Zooms per year, both educational opportunities as well as support groups. YouTube, we provided 8,000 hours of training in the last 12 months via YouTube. And our YouTube numbers go up by about 2,000 to 3,000 hours per year. So YouTube is definitely a growth space. Our Zooms are going worldwide. I have recently been talking to a parent in Yokohama, Japan, and he's able to access one of our support groups in the morning while the folks in California and the United States do it in the evening. And he enjoys hearing the American perspective. And he also is in a support group in Japan for the Japanese perspective where the child's growing up. We're beginning to do a little bit in AI But I expect by next year, we'll be using it more robustly in order to create efficiencies. But at this time, we're just using it for speeds up writing job descriptions and speeds up some of our clerical work and things like that.
Yep, definitely. And AI is a really powerful tool, and is being able to be used in like any field now. It's not just tech fields. So you guys using AI will definitely help because that's the future. So talking now
Yeah.
about
But the downside of the AI piece in terms of the disabilities community, as I see it, is AI can address your informational needs, but it can't address the emotional needs.
yeah.
And, I went to this webinar where they trained you on how you could, make yourself an avatar and you could record your voice and then your avatar could be presenting. But avatars don't make you feel like connected to a community. So I'm excited to see how AI can make us more efficient, but I think humans need authentic relationships. We need to be authentic with each other, and AI can't provide that. AI can't provide an authentic emotional response when you tell AI that your child was just diagnosed with autism, for example. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out.
Definitely, there's a lot of things that AI can't. It's like the medicine field. AI will never be able to take over for complex surgery like a human can.
Yeah.
Right. So now I wanted to ask you about the ideology of person-centered thinking. So that's how your service empowers these disabled or neurodivergent kids to make their own choices to the best of their capabilities throughout their life.
This is a great topic. Person centered thinking really began around the year 2000 in the UK and has since spread to the United States. And the concept is pretty simple. So, you, for example, have a person centered life. You're going to go to college and major in what you want to major in. For most of your life, you will choose what you want to eat and who your friends are. You'll choose your living situation. Essentially, all parts of your life will be based on your choices, your preferences, your values. But for most of human history, people with disabilities didn't have person-centered lives. Their lives were based on, you could go to this group home or that group home. You could go to this sheltered workshop to build one thing or that sheltered workshop to do another thing. It wasn't based on the actual preferences and personality of the people with disabilities. And so throughout America, our systems of care are beginning to move more in the direction of really personal choice, and people's lives should reflect their personal preferences and values. And so what we do with it at Parents Helping Parents is to train the parents in the philosophy and the tools to develop person-centered plans with their kids. And you can also use it to develop person-centered plans with people with dementia or other adults. But we also advocate for the philosophy of, the importance of people with disabilities who have passions. Maybe they love gardening. Their life should be inclusive of gardening. Or maybe they love trains. Their life should be inclusive of trains. That our lives should reflect, our unique humanity.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's definitely the next step. And delving more into that, and you talked about IEPs earlier, individualized education plans. How does PHP assist these children and adult parents uh, in understanding and participating in these IEPs? And what specific strategies do you use to teach these kids to advocate for themselves when a parent can't do so?
Okay, well, with the student-led IEP, we start with the basics of, what is an IEP? What is the goal? And then we explain what an IEP meeting is and the different people who would be at the IEP meeting. And then we teach the student to consider the agenda for the meeting and what, having a plan. So you're able to drive the meeting and not just be a participant in the meeting. And depending on the student's disability level, they can really run the entire meeting, or for some, they just come to the beginning and may start out with just sharing their preferences and their values and who they are, and then they may return to class to do other things. But whatever level they can participate in, our feeling is that every child should begin participating in IEP meetings. If not in elementary school, kind of in the junior high time. But it's also about supporting the parents in taking the step back. And for many of us parents, when your kids are little, you fight for everything. And then as they grow up, you need to, take a step back and let them take a step up, right? And it's an intricate dance between every parent and every kid all over the world, right? As young people grow up. So it's also about supporting the parent emotionally and thinking through, the appropriateness of them, the parent moving into more of a passenger seat role and letting their child step into more of a driver's seat.
Mm-hmm. And does the IEP go through the child's school district, public school district, or?
It does. So it goes through your senior year of high school for most young people with disabilities. And then for some, they get an extended education provided by their public school district through 22.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about one of the things I also heard from this family friend, in which his child was diagnosed with nonverbal autism. So he was at the level in which the public school system asks him to enroll in a private school. And what that parent said was that public schools have all the state funding and resources to have a great special education program and actually implement these IEPs, while private schools have their tuition money, which is not even close to what the state allots these public schools. So they didn't want their kid, who has his own strengths and has the capability to choose what he wants, but just not say it, to be limited by this lack of resources. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tricky situation. So the law requires that every child is provided with a free public education. It does not require that public education be incredible. Like some people in America get incredible free public educations, and some do not. Some get mediocre, right? And so, but every child is entitled to a free public education. In addition, they're required to have the child in the least restrictive environment possible. And so for some students, that means they should be in a general ed classroom all day. And for some students, it means they should be in a general ed classroom half the day. But whatever it is, they should be in the least restrictive environment possible. So that's what guides the school choice. And parents are a really important part of this process because, especially if the child is nonverbal, the parent knows more about their child than anybody else on the IEP team, than any expert there, than any teacher there. I mean, everyone sees their different lens of the child, but the parent has spent the most time with this child over the lifetime. And so it's dependent on the parent to be a true partner in the IEP team and express what the child's needs are and the child's gifts are, and advocate for the least restrictive environment possible. But there's oftentimes a difference of opinion between what the most appropriate placement is in a school setting for kids, and some are placed in non-public schools that may cost 5 times what it costs to educate the average child at a public school. So some of the out of school placements, especially for kids with really extensive medical challenges, can be very at very high costs, and the public school that child is sent from pays the tuition for those non-public schools.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thank you.
But
And
we're really lucky because some of the non-public schools and private schools that exist in America have some really great tailored resources if it's the right spot for that child.
I know my school has a great special education program, and the kids in our school coexist with neurodivergent kids just like they're a part of the community.
That's great because they are part of the community and they're going to be your coworkers and they're going to be your clients and they may be your bosses. So it's really important that we all learn to understand each other while we're in school together.
Yep. And just to end us off, could you possibly provide 5 key takeaways from our conversation today, or that you hope that our listeners will gain from this podcast?
All right. Number 1, disabilities are the largest minority in America. 1 in 5 people have a disability. So when you consider tailored solutions for groups of people, disability should be included. Second, inclusion really matters. And sometimes it can make people uncomfortable. And so to do it well, we have to get comfortable talking about it. So if you're uncomfortable with neurodiversity or disability, I would just invite you to listen to podcasts on it, read books on it, put yourself in spaces so you can learn more because it's not going away. It's going to be part of your life forever. And so having a level of comfort with it can really help. Third, connections really matter. So if you are a person who is neurodiverse or a parent of one or a spouse of one or a child of one, there's communities out there for you that can help you with resources and information so that you don't have to invent everything by yourself and figure everything out by yourself. Would like to invite your listeners to join the disability community in advocating for full inclusion for all people. I mean, if we're doing inclusion, all should mean all, not just people who are neurotypical and physically typical. And then my last point is for you and for the younger listeners, and just an urge that you be passionate and that you be curious in your work. I've been in the nonprofit sector for 25 years now, and Parents Helping Parents is the most effective organization I've ever worked with because everyone who works at Parents Helping Parents, all 40 of the staff, almost everyone is a parent of a child with special needs and so has huge passion for reaching more families and providing more support. And so we get an incredible amount of work done. This group of 40 people has a website visited by 300,000 people. Now that's crazy, that this small group is able to make this huge impact. And it's because of the passion and drive that the group I work with brings to their work. So for those of you who are younger, I just urge you to, whether you're working in corporate or you're working in nonprofit or you're working in the government sector, like you only get one walk around this planet. So try to work with great people who are passionate and try to do work you're passionate about because it makes life much richer and makes our world better. So that's it for you younger generation.
Yep. Thank you so much for those. And thanks for joining this podcast and talking about this topic. It was a really different, unique, but needed episode to talk about. And it's definitely a great topic for our viewers. And thanks so much, everyone, for listening or watching to this episode of the Exponential Edge podcast. And tune in next time to listen to ideas, trends, and topics that will see exponential adoption in the future. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.